And so one kind of we've already had planned, and we'll look at another one later. So let's just welcome Kathy Moore. Thank you, Kathy. Do you want to be, would you like to be here? You're going to be there. Okay. Thanks for coming.
I gotta make a fairy, thank you.
So I Joe.
But you're gonna videotape it, right?
It is?
Good, okay.
Thank
you.
Safe travels.
First of all, thank you for your prayers. I tell you, it's no fun to have COVID. This is day 46 for me.
46?
I have what they call long-term COVID. I'm not contagious, but I still have the symptoms of exhaustion and tiredness and back pain. So I thank you for your prayers that I'm alive.
COVID survivor. Praise God.
Sister Mary Matthew, as many of you know her, Sister Frances died in 97, so many of you have never met her unless you've taken the classes. But Sister Mary Matthew was born in 1928, and when she was 5 years old, she was a very precocious child. She ran the full length of her chicken, they raised chickens. And they owned the ranch, and from the Weiser Lake at Linden, from Weiser Lake to the Nooksack Rivers, all their land.
Oh, wow.
And the chicken, she ran across the beam of the poultry barn. She went out the back door, and the door shut behind her, and she couldn't open it. And she looked down, and as she would say, this is the unromantic part of her story. Down below her was her dad's manure spreader. And she saw a bar that went up and across and down. And as I said, she was a very precocious 5-year-old. She jumped down on that bar, landed just so, and then she slipped and fell on the spikes. And the spikes were in neutral, and she fell to the ground. So she grew up with a crooked back, disc down to nothing, one leg shorter than the other, and it also affected her hearing, so she was deaf.
Oh, wow.
She loved her mother. I've never heard anyone say such praises to her mother and her father. But she entered school at the age of 9½, and she, even though she was deaf, she was able to go into the high school symphony and play the piano and the violin, and then also played in Washington Symphony later on in college. So she wore a black bass all of her life, got out of PE, and was in constant pain, she said, all of her life. In order to make the bed, she had to kneel. The Sisters of St. Joseph of Peace accepted her, mess and all. Only the leaders knew of her back condition. For her 25th anniversary of being a nun, she went back to Mankato, Minnesota, to the School Sisters of Notre Dame convent, where Father, oh no dear, anyway, Monsignor Rosich and his prayer group gave a retreat. They prayed over Sister, and that night her roommate was Sister Marie Exner, who was a school sister at Notre Dame. And she kept waking up Maria and say, something's happening to my back, something's happening to my back. And in the morning when she got out of bed, her back was completely healed. Wow. Both legs were the same length. Her crooked back was straight. The hump on her back was gone, and no more pain. This made healing real to her. And now that happened, I figured out it was in '74, was her 25th anniversary. She was 46 years old at that time. So for 40 years, she had lived in pain. But this made healing real to her, and when Father Leo Thomas in Tacoma offered classes on the healing ministry, the very first classes, she signed up for him. Now we go to Sister Mary Frances Hackman. She was born premature and placed in an orphanage. Her grandparents took her out for a while, put her back in. Her aunt and uncle took her out for a while, put her back in. And so she needed a lot of inner healing because she didn't know who she was. She was later teaching in Seattle. And she was ministering to the parents and their kids and didn't know how to pray with them. Didn't know what to say to them. And she had just left a session with a parent and went into the chapel to pray for him. And there on the bulletin board was a notice of Father Leo Thomas's classes. And so she signed up for him and went, and there was Sister Matthew. She said, "What are you doing here?" And then Matthew says, "What are you doing here?" And so those two and Sister Siobhan, also a Sister of St. Joseph of Peace, as well as Charlotte Sanders, became a foursome in the class. After the classes were finished, they met on a retreat. The sister was stationed in Port Angeles at the time, and she had a friend there in the parish that either worked at the Lake Crescent or else was the owner. I don't know. I don't remember the story. But anyway, they got the weekend free for the first retreat at Port Townsend, at Lake Crescent. Next year, they each one invited a person, and anyway, he's still coming to the retreat, and he was the second person to come to the. He came the second year of that retreat. So the retreat grew, and Sister Matthew started healing ministry right away. And by 84, they had healing teams in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Montreal, throughout Washington, California, Oregon, Mexico, Australia, as they taught the teams. And so then in 82, Sister's father in Bayside, Bayview, here outside of Anacortes, her father was there and he suffered health problems. So Sister left Port Angeles and came over and lived with her brother and also in a trailer on her brother's property. There she began, and Sister Frances was with her in the healing ministry. And there they began planning a house of prayer, in which they even drew up plans for hermitages. And there was a next door to her brother's there on Montague Road, 3.5 acres that they were willing to sell for $70,000. And someone donated $100,000 to buy the land and to start this house of prayer. And it had, and they set up a nonprofit to help run it. The Amendolas from Roseburg, Oregon, who were psychiatrists, both of them were licensed psychiatrists, were going to come up and live there permanently and be on the staff for counseling and for help with this retreat house. The Doreen Gowett, we knew her as Doreen, how you pronounce her last name, Dagenais? Dagenais, from Canada, prayed about it and came down from Canada to join the sisters as full-time staff. Art Halls was going to come over and help with the maintenance. They drew up a nonprofit. status. Everything was in place. Everything is ready to be signed. And the bishop had approved it. Their order had approved it. But the priest at Immaculate Conception in Mount Vernon did not approve it. And so on the day it was to be signed, they received word that they could not do it. Okay, then the sisters came through and said, we will rent a house of prayer for you in Anacortes. And so they moved in '86 to Anacortes, and they dissolved the nonprofit. They were all ready to, and anyway, this new house had 4 bedrooms. They had plenty of places for people to come, and they wanted people to come for long-term prayer of inner healing. And they wanted a place for retreats to be held by those who had taken the classes. And so the first place was the Peyton Place on Oaks Avenue. Everyone laughed at the Peyton Place, but the sisters just laughed, but they didn't know what they were talking about. So over in Port Angeles, when they came over here in '82, Art Halls had just moved with his large family to Sequim. And one of their daughters was autistic. And she could not read. She had heard about the retreat held at Fort Worden. Only it wasn't at Fort Worden at this time, it was at Camp David. It was held in many places up until 1990 when it went to Fort Worden. And it's been held at Fort Worden ever since 1990. But so Art Halls and his wife Lucetta, who was on oxygen, and their autistic daughter came to the retreat. The sisters prayed over the autistic daughter, and the daughter explained, I can now read. And someone said, oh yes, and they shoved the Bible under her nose, and she read it.
Amen.
Then someone said, tell us what you just read, and she explained what she just read. She later became a Carmelite nun. She's in Southern California. We met her a few years later. She can only come home like once in 5 years. And we happened to visit Art and Essie Halls, his new wife, when she was visiting. And she said that when the sisters prayed over her, her brain sizzled. And then she said everything stood still. In the past, all of her life, everything was moving. The letters on the page were always moving, so she couldn't make sense of them. She said, I couldn't pick up a block because it was moving under my hand. And I couldn't put it on top of another block because it was always moving. And she says everything stood still after the sisters prayed for her. And then she was at the convent, and when her mother Lucetta died, she was reading her obituary up on the board, and she was going like this. And she didn't know that her superior came up behind her, and she says, what are you doing? And she says, I'm shooing the flies away from the notice. And the superior knew there weren't any flies. She says, let's get your eyes examined. And they took her to a specialist, she said, and by using different colors of mylar, he could duplicate everything standing still again. And so she wears special glasses, and therefore she can function and read okay. So, and then a few days after this retreat, Lucetta was cleaning the house and noticed that she did not have her oxygen turned on. She no longer needed her oxygen. So because of these 2 miracles, the hall said, we are going to thank the Lord by taking over the retreat. And so Art and Lucetta took over the retreat in '82 with their prayer ministry. They formed a nonprofit, and they ran the ministry up until Art retired at the age of 90 in 2011. And he told us several years ahead of that, I'm retiring at the age of 90. And no one stepped forward to take over the ministry. of the retreat. So that when they came here, 2 other people had moved to Port Angeles, Olympic Peninsula at the same time, Rita Murray and Betty Allen. And they became leaders of the ministry over in the Olympic Peninsula. The training of these ministries covers all aspects of the healing ministry work. God is healing us in and through each other. And this is normal Christianity, and that's what Father Leo Thomas taught in his classes. So with his house of prayer in Bayview, became a house of prayer on Oaks Avenue. Then they wanted to pray with those who came for inner healing. They wanted to give retreats, days of recollection, and train healing teams there. And in '86, Doreen Gowett from Vancouver, BC started it. Joined them permanently as they're part of the three people that ran it. And in the information I got, it was in '87 that Anna Cordes started the ministry. So, so those that took the first classes started in '87. So, in '97, I joined Sister Mary Matthew. Sister Frances died September 18th, and I joined Sister October 16th. God works fast. Sister had prayed, Lord, you sent them out 2 by 2. I wanted good, pure, holy, prayerful partner. And she got me. God has a sense of humor sometimes. And I had been praying, Lord, tell me, give my life to you. Tell me where to go, and I'll go there. Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. This has another ending. Just recently, the Lord spoke to me because I was complaining. Lord, here I have a master's of theology, and all I am is a care companion. And he answered me and he said, I did not put you with Sister Mary Matthew because of your being able to speak or anything else. I put you there because you are an answer to her prayer. Mm-hmm. And I put you with Frances as an answer to her prayer. Mm-hmm. So, in 2011, I said to Art Halls, I will take over the retreat. And so I took it over, and Sister Mary Matthew was my helper. It was not part of St. Joseph Healing Ministry. I said, she said, well, how do you want me to help you? And I said, make the phone calls, because I hate making phone calls. And so that's what she did, was continue to do that. In 1990, Trish Bostrom and Janet Reisling formed the Healing Outreach. Healing Outreach is a nonprofit organization to help the sisters raise money so that people could give and still have it being a nonprofit and give financially. And they turned all the money over, and the Healing Outreach is formed to help ministries in Christian ministries in healing. So Healing Outreach has been in existence since 1990, helping us. These videos that I showed, if anyone was watching them, they have helped over almost 200 people. Through the money that they raised, over 200 people came on scholarships since 2011, since I took over. We have had over 200 scholarships come in these 10 years. And that was all raised through Healing Outreach. So, and this is to help provide funds for travel. They printed materials and working expenses. All funds received by Healing Outreach goes to the support of the work of the sisters. So in 2018, it was voted on that the two ministries be joined, and that a nonprofit of St. Joseph Healing Ministry be organized, and so that's what was done. And so now we have both Healing Outreach as well as St. Joseph Healing Ministry are two avenues in which people can donate to the ministry. When I was with Sister for 15 years, we traveled all over the United States, Canada, Eastern Canada, up in the Yukon, up into Saskatchewan, and we gave Life in the Spirit seminars, talks on prayer. We visited all the prayer teams that Sister had organized. And we went down to Mexico. We went and talked to the prayer teams there. I didn't get to go to Australia, but the two sisters did. I did go to Trinidad, and we gave 5 days of talks there until we got word that sister's father was ill, so we had to fly back early. Praying with people in this ministry is just awesome, because it's not you. It's God. As Sister Frances said, she couldn't pray with people for over a year. She just didn't have the nerve. And some of you who are just taking the classes, it's really scary. I didn't pray with people for years. I had my friend on my phone. That's when we got call waiting, because we were on the phone for hours. And she would pray these beautiful long prayers. And finally, just shortly, I didn't know it at the time, but it was shortly before I joined Sister, I said the prayer. And she says, "Oh, Kathy, that's so beautiful." And then when I joined Sister, she had me pray in the chapel. Sister said, "Oh, that was so beautiful, Kathy. How long have you been praying like that?" I said, 2 weeks. And then Frances said that the second year of the classes, they were invited to speak to the prayer group in Stanwood. And so they went, and she didn't say who went, whether all 4 of them went or just she and Matthew went. But there were 200 people there. Wow. And she said, "Lord, you're on." And at the end of that evening, she finally had the confidence in God. God will do this healing. And I had to learn a lot of things. One thing was, when Sister gave her talk, she'd get way off of the subject. And I would say, "Sister, that's not your subject. That's, and I'd be fretting away, "Sister," and she'd always come back to the same place where she left off. I don't know how she did it. And every single time I fretted, every single time, I heard, God let me hear someone come up to Sister and say, "Boy, when you got off subject, that's just what I needed to hear." Okay, so I learned finally after 15 years, and then she died, not to fret when Sister got off subject. People would say, "Tell Sister not to talk too long." How can you tell her not to talk? It's impossible. So anyway, that's a brief history. I could tell you lots of miracles that happened during this experience of living with Sister. I just am so glad that I was able to live in a house of prayer, in a convent, had a chapel with our Lord in it, and I was just so blessed with this experience. And I'm so glad that this ministry is continuing. I'm glad so many people are into it. I'm hoping that soon they'll be able to start praying with people again after Mass and have healing services once again. COVID really slowed us down in many, many ways. And this talk rejuvenated me. I'm good for another hour. Okay, so this is followed by a presentation I made on the video on the healing ministry. So we will. Could you hear me? One of the next.
Yes, I can.
Come back here, honey.
Yeah. Kathy Moore, St. Joseph Ministries.
That's Father Paul. That's the parish.